Tantor Audio, a division of recorded books, presents Growth of the Soil by Knut Hamsun. Translated by Severa Lyngstad. Introduction by Brad Lighthouser. Narrated by B.J. Harrison. Introduction. Good ground. It would seem the most fundamental story in the world. Man meets woman. They marry, they have children who grow to a marriageable age, and the cycle begins anew. But there's a story more basic still, as Knut Hamsun's Growth of the Soil reminds us. Tremendous initial obstacles must be overcome before the novel's hero, taciturn Isak, can even contemplate marriage or a family. He has land to clear. He has to carve a home for himself out of the wilderness. Isak appears on the first page of the novel, although his name is withheld. Who needs a name when you're all alone, when there's no one to address or to address you? A man comes walking north. He carries a sack, the first sack, containing provisions for the road and some implements. The man is strong and rough-hewn, with a red iron beard and little scars on face and hands. Here's an explorer who intuitively understands that Adam's curse will obtain in whatever territory he discovers. Man must live by the sweat of his brow. Isak is a born worker. Apparently, the consequences of Adam's fall extend to the animal kingdom, since it's hard to imagine beasts of burden, overtaxed horses, oxen, mules, toiling unrelievedly in Eden. Often likened to an animal, Isak slowly raised his hand up to his hair, like a bear raising his paw. He pulled it, the log, up to the hut like an ox. Isak is a great one for bearing loads, and whether man or animal, he accepts his burdens without complaint, as though not having a load on his back was a lazy way of life and nothing for him. In Growth of the Soil, Hamsun writes magnificently against his natural grain. Readers familiar with his earlier, shorter, perhaps more celebrated books, Hunger or Pan or Mysteries, know Hamsun as a writer of bright fragments, lyrical explosions. Growth of the Soil proceeds at a different tempo. In this vast novel, Hamsun is uncharacteristically patient and painstaking. He means to recreate what life was like for an earlier generation of homesteaders in the Norwegian forests of the far north. Hamsun's long life, 1859 to 1952, encompassed broad transformations in his Scandinavian homeland. And if Growth of the Soil unfolds in a world deliberately removed from dates and datable events, it heralds the arrival of the modern world. By the novel's conclusion, the virgin territory that Isak cleared by hand is strung with telegraph wires and combed by mowing machines. Soon after clearing his land, Isak finds a mate, the elusive Inger, a tall, brown-eyed girl, buxom and coarse, with a pair of good, heavy hands. She was wearing boots of reindeer hide on her feet, though she was no Lapp, and carrying a calfskin bag on her back. Though her face is deformed by a hair lip that reduces her voice to a sort of hissing, like a vent leaking steam, Isak is devoted to her, as he is to the children of their union. But even as the story grows increasingly populated, it maintains an uncluttered purity. For it is still, always, the tale of Isak's efforts to wrest a livelihood, and eventually a flourishing prosperity, out of a terrain inimical toward the faint-hearted. A man comes walking north, yes, and everything else is a luxury and an embellishment. The closest English-language cousin to Growth of the Soil may be Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe. Both books extol that least romantic of virtues, husbandry, above all others. When Crusoe finally meets the native he christens Friday, a welcome relay of human emotions floods the narrative. Even so, what lingers in the reader's mind is the marooned man's resourceful solitude, to which Friday's arrival seems but an accentual contrast. Paleontologists like to remind us that the survival of Homo sapiens was hardly a sure bet across the disease and climate-ravaged eons, a notion that would probably have drawn a mulling knot of agreement from Hamsun. To what, then, do we owe our ongoing existence? To the Isaks among us, who, in their doggedness, their unthinking resolution, treat adversity as nothing less than their due. Isak might be regarded as someone blessed with an unreflecting soul. Not so his creator, whose attempts to sift the world's complexities led to shameful loyalties and consequences. Hamsun was a Nazi sympathizer in a country conquered by the Nazis. And unlike a good many writers whose flirtation with fascism cooled as the German nightmare heated up, Hamsun's devotion endured to the bitter end. After learning of Hitler's death, he wrote an unsolicited eulogy that began, "I am not worthy to speak his name out loud. Nor do his life and his deeds warrant any kind of sentimental discussion. He was a warrior for mankind, and a prophet of the gospel of justice for all nations." Hamsun's defenders have tendered various explanations and extenuations. He was an old man when the Second World War began. He was living in isolation on the coast of Norway. His primary conduit to the outside world, his wife, Marie, was an even more committed Nazi supporter than he was. The Norwegians sentenced her to 3 years' labor after the war. He was nearly deaf. Robert Ferguson's fine biography, Enigma, The Life of Knut Hamsun, discusses with subtlety the psychological underpinnings of Hamsun's traitorous allegiance. Long before the ascendance of Nazism, Hamsun had felt an abiding gratitude toward Germany, where his books had always been warmly embraced, and an unreasoning antipathy toward England, where his work had received a chillier and less astute response. He saw himself joining a long and noble tradition of kindred sensibilities and shared heritage, in which Germany, richer and more powerful than its Scandinavian neighbors, served as a natural patron. As he observed after the war, "There is not a single great name in our land which has not had to go via Germany to achieve its success, whether in art or in science. It has meant so much for us to have access to this great linguistic community." In addition, and perhaps most important, Hamsun instinctively trusted in a course of rebellion against his countrymen. Didn't he owe everything, including the Nobel Prize he'd been awarded in 1920, to his perversity and fierceness? Wasn't a fine disregard for the pieties of Norwegian society the very wellspring of his art? After the Second World War, Hamsun's countrymen arrested him for betraying Norway. The trial was protracted and painful, and in its spectacle of a nation trying to pin remorse on a stubbornly unrepentant and remarkably wily old man, by turns comic and sad. Ultimately, Hamsun was released on the basis of permanently impaired mental faculties. This was a verdict strongly undermined by publication of On Overgrown Paths in 1949, a memoir cum rationale that hardly seemed the product of an irredeemably unhinged mind. Still, it was easy enough to believe that Hamsun, who had long sought to explore the hazardous threshold of sanity, might have gone over the edge. His first great success.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?